Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Simple Pin podcast. Every once in a while, somebody comes along who tells you part of their story, and it gives you freedom to try something new, to experiment, and kind of go against the grain. And I feel like that is today's podcast that I want to share with you from Dana White. This is part of our Summer Story series. I wanted to interview her because I have met her ages ago, which you'll hear about in the episode, but I've watched her business grow over the years. And frankly, before I recorded this episode, I really didn't know a whole lot about how that story had unfolded. And it surprised me and it encouraged me and it helped me to see things in a different way. So if you are burned out, if you are overwhelmed, if you have been on the content hamster wheel for years, or you're even wondering what's next for you, this is a podcast that I hope will just sit right with your soul. It will just encourage you, it will inspire you, and it will give you some aha moments where you go, maybe I need to be doing that, or maybe I don't need to be doing that. So with that, here is my episode with Dana White. Dana, welcome to the Simple Pin podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this conversation.
I know, me too. I was just watching one of your videos and it was about decluttering. And I loved what you said because you were pulling out things of a drawer, right? And it was a liner that went in a drawer. But there's two things I loved about it. One, the authenticity that you just comes across in your videos. But two, you said there's trash in here. And I know everybody doesn't think they have trash, but everybody's got trash, right? So I want to actually jump off on that point. Like, do people really push back that they don't have trash? Like they try to resist it?
Yes, they do. Here's the thing. I have been doing this for a long time. We actually met years and years and years ago at the beginning of when I was doing this. So I've been doing this for like 16 years. I have quite literally heard all the excuses, right? Like I've heard, and I say that as someone who had the same excuses. So I'm not saying this like, oh my word, what's wrong with you? You don't think you have trash. I'm saying it as the person who also did not think that I had trash because I had all this stuff in my house that I had brought in because it was good stuff, because it was interesting stuff, because it was useful. And yet I brought so much in that my house was so out of control that I was too overwhelmed to even get started. And the longer I was overwhelmed and didn't get started, clutter just grows, like it multiplies and little things get added. And so there's always trash to start with. And I always tell people too, even if you don't have trash, which you do, you always do. Even if you're convinced you're the one, then who doesn't have trash, still look for trash because there's purpose in that part of the step too, which I know we're not talking about my decluttering steps, but that's where I come from is like, I know the resistance to getting started. I know how hard it is to get started. Like resisting is not, I'm not starting because I don't want to start. I'm not starting because I'm so completely overwhelmed and bewildered. And that's where I was. And that's what I had to work through. And so when people push back on these things, I'm like, I get it. Like, I know why you're saying this, but I also know I've literally heard from thousands and thousands of people. And I hear both the excuses, but more than that, I hear the people who tell me, I didn't believe you. Then I tried it and you were right. And I'm like, yes.
Right. Right. And you're like, you wouldn't have listened to me in the beginning because you wouldn't have thought that I was right. But I actually think to your point about the beginning of starting something, you started writing anonymously on your blog. Like you didn't even use your real name. Was that tied into the overwhelming thought of like starting this new thing? And like, if nobody knows, I can't be held accountable.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. So my story is I wanted to be a writer. Blogs were a new thing. And I was like, that's it. I've got to have one. And I didn't start my blog for a year and a half after I had this realization that that's what I've got to do because my house was a disaster. Did not ever occur to me until it did occur to me, but would never have occurred to me that my house would be the thing I would write about. I started writing as a practice blog. Like it was just meant to be a temporary thing. I was going to write about it for a couple of months as a way to get focused on my house, which had been my lifelong debilitating struggle, right? My house was a total disaster and I had tried and could never figure it out. So I was like, I'll focus on my house. This will keep me focused. I can learn about blogging, the thing that I want to do. So when I started anonymously, the intention was not to turn this into a blog. It was that this was going to be a temporary thing. No one was ever going to know it was me writing this. I was going to learn some things. I'd get my house under control, and then I'd start writing about other stuff that I actually felt qualified and wanted to write about. Well, it's 16 years later, and I'm still writing about the same thing because, well, for so many reasons, right? But mostly because what I realized through doing that was the same thing that people were getting from reading my writing, which was most people who write about organizing write about it because they love it, right? Like it's that's fun to them. They enjoy it. And that makes total sense that that's who would write about this. But because it is not natural to me and I was writing about it, one of the things I realized through people reading and saying, oh my goodness, my brain works like yours does. My brain works very differently from the brain of a naturally organized person. And that is the reason why often organizing advice written by naturally organized people was like a foreign language to me that I couldn't learn. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. And I would try to do the things that they said to do. And it was like, didn't work. So as I was figuring it out, other people were gaining understanding from that. And in the beginning, I wasn't teaching anything. Like I was just saying, and people would say like, teach us what you're doing. And I probably could go back and find the emails because I never delete emails, right? Of me going, no, like, why would you learn from me? This makes no sense. No. You don't want to learn from me because I'm not perfect and I never will be. But it was several years in that I realized, actually, that's the need. Right? Like there are lots of people who will tell you how to have a beautifully organized home. I'm never going to tell you how to do that. They can tell you how to go from completely bewildered and overwhelmed and having thought you tried everything out there to, oh, I can do this. I can declutter. I can get my house under control.
Yes. And I so agree with you on this topic of the experts who teach it are already experts at managing it themselves. It's something that comes natural to them. So they really don't understand this hurdle to get from point A to point B where they're paralyzed back at point A. They will often look at you and just say, well, just do it. Like get to point B. And the person doesn't need to hear that. They need to be with somebody who goes, I understand. And here is my story. And I think that's why stories are so impactful because people hear themselves in it. They take away little pieces that create light bulb moments and they go, oh, I can do it. So I have two questions that spin off of that. One, when did you reveal your identity as Dana?
So it was about 2.5 years in. I wrote my first ebook and it's called 28 Days to Hope for Your Home. It's actually now included as the appendix of my first traditionally published book because it was kind of really good. But it was a 28-day guide to going from completely bewildered to, oh, okay, now I know what it takes to get my house under control. So when I wrote that book, because my desire had been to be a writer, and here I was writing an ebook, and I was like, I'm going to put my name on it. This was my dream. I was living my dream at this time. And so I made the decision to say my real name. Lots of people were like, I wondered if Noni was a real name or not. You really never said it, but I called myself Noni, short for anonymous, back when I thought it was temporary, but yeah.
Okay. So in that overwhelm, I'm going to transition a little bit to business because you're kind of accidentally growing this business and entrepreneurship can be so overwhelming. And you have the same thing happen in entrepreneurial spaces, right? You have people who teach scale to 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, like the same nonsense we hear all the time. And it has oftentimes been really easy for those people to do that. It just kind of comes naturally. So how were you navigating both this newfound medium of expressing your overwhelmedness about decluttering, but at the same time managing a growing business that, as we all know as entrepreneurs, is really overwhelming at times because there's so many pieces and parts. I mean, I shut down when somebody's like, you got to fix this code on your site. I'm like, I'm out. Like, I can't even think about it. So how were you navigating both at the same time?
So when I had the idea to start a blog, I started doing all the research, right? And that was in 2008. So it's been a long time ago. It's hard when people say, well, how do I get started? I'm like, well, I started so long ago. Things are completely different now, right? But at the time, I was looking at what were the best platforms, what were the best practices, all these things to be ready for the one day when I was going to start my blog. Well, when I had this moment of realizing, oh, I need to do a practice blog about this thing that nobody's ever going to find out about, right? And so it had so much less pressure. I went with the lowest point of entry, right? So I started a blog spot that you could literally start in less than 5 minutes. And I had this mindset of the purpose of this thing that I'm doing is to learn for someday when I do the real thing. I am so thankful for that now because it was so low pressure and it gave me so much freedom to experiment. So I put ads on my site, which I know at the time was a little bit controversial, and
I remember that.
writing for all the right reasons, right? And but I was like, I had it in my mindset that I was like, I am doing this because I want to be a writer. And I would say that on my blog. I was like, I want to be a writer. And what I mean by that is I want writing to be my job. If writing is going to be my job, I have to get paid to write. This is how I put ads on my site. I went to a blogging conference. I think that's where we met. I don't know if it's the first one or the second one, but I went to that with this mindset. I thought I was learning things for the future, but I would go ahead and experiment and practice. And I tried some sponsored posts. I learned over time that I hate sponsored posts with every fiber of my being, right?
Yes, totally.
But at the time, it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe somebody's paying me $100 to do this thing. So
or sending me a waffle maker.
Right. Like it was exciting. But I learned through doing that. I learned what worked. I learned what people responded to. I learned all of that. And so what was the question?
Well, actually, no, you answered it for sure of like these overwhelming pieces. And I think actually you ending that way makes sense because there are so many different things. And to your point of when we got started in 2008 and 2009, I mean, I remember the blog spot. I remember the debate over ads. It was just when SEO was coming on the scene. And from my perspective, and I would wonder about yours too, it felt easier because it was a lot of this bumping along and you had Facebook and then Pinterest came along and then you kind of had Instagram. You didn't have 7 different platforms to try to be all the places and do all the things.
Right.
You could just choose one and kind of bump along and figure it out. There was an extra layer of grace for figuring it out. And that was a longer lead time as opposed to, well, when you start it, you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row. It's like, don't start it until you're ready. But we kind of had that luxury of.
We did. And I still think it's possible, right? Like I don't want to speak because it is not my business model to teach people how to start an entrepreneurial journey. Like that is not my business model, right? But I do have these conversations with people a lot. And I do think that experimentation mindset is incredibly powerful because it allows you, I always call it non-committal experimentation, right? Like, and I teach this in decluttering as well, right? And it's this, I'm going to try, I'm convinced of one thing, but I'm going to try this thing, even if it's just to see if it works or not, see if it's going to be a failure. And then it's like, okay, well, if I fail, then that's not a bad thing. It's just something I can check off my list as, okay, then that's not something I need to worry about. So I do think it lent itself really well to that. But even that mindset for me was really, really powerful, that this was just a learning environment for me. Yeah.
When you use the term, you were identifying as a writer. So a lot of people will say entrepreneur, business owner, blogger, content creator, whatever it is. Did you think about your identity being any of those other things? Or is it always just, I'm going towards being a writer? Like, and that is my goal.
I am all of those things, right? And so the writer, which now I say author, right? Because I publish books. The writer is the driving force. Right? Like that is my thing. If everything else falls away, I'm going to continue to be a writer. But the other reality is that successful writers need to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just, even those who don't also have a podcast and also have YouTube and also have the blog and all that, it's a part of it now. I mean, it's very rare for someone to have the kind of writing career that we read about in books, from where you sat in a room and you sent it off and somebody else did all the work and the checks started coming in or whatever. It's just part of it. And I have learned through doing that, I do very much enjoy the entrepreneurial side of things. Like I enjoy the experimentation. I enjoy the creativity. I enjoy trying things. My publisher several years ago asked me to do these audio products, right? Because my audiobooks do really well. And so they were like, hey, we're trying to experiment on something of doing these like 1-hour audio products, basically that are on audiobook platforms as opposed to podcast platforms. And I was like, you had me at experimentation. And like, when you tell me you want to use me to experiment, I'm like, that's my favorite thing, is like, let's just play with this thing and figure out and see what does it hurt? Because you just literally never know what is going to stick and what's going to connect with your audience and connect you with the right people.
Yeah, it's very true. So then when did your first traditionally published book, I don't even want to say when it launched, but when that opportunity came knocking at your doorstep? And was it like, oh, like the angels are singing, I get to finally be a writer. Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it would have been 2015, I think. So about 6 years in. It's funny because would have a few people that I would talk to about entrepreneurship, right? As you know, there are a lot of people who want to talk about it. And then there is a much smaller group of people who like act upon it. You know what I mean? And so people like want to pick your brain on things. And that's great. Like I love talking about this stuff. But then I really get excited with the friends who are like, hey, I get this thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what have you thought about this? And then they like come back the next week and they say, okay, I did that thing and here was the result. And I'm like, okay, we are on the same wavelength. Like, so I had a friend who had started writing Christian romance novels, which is not my thing, right? But she had a very entrepreneurial mindset about it. And so we would have these great conversations. And we were talking one time and I was like, hey, you can't write all the Christian romance that your reader wants to read, right? Like if it takes you, let's say at the least 6 months to get a book that you self-publish out there, they're going to read more than one novel in a month. So you need to connect with other people who are doing the same thing as you so that you can then recommend to each other. And that's what you mean. So she did that. She got out there. She found her group of people who wrote things similar to hers. And through that, she found an agent. And then her agent happened to mention to her that she was wanting to get into nonfiction. And she said, oh, my friend Dana, so it's so funny because it like at the time that we had that conversation, did I ever in a million years think that she would be my prep to traditional publishing? We were just having a conversation. Like you don't know where any of that stuff is going to go. And so I talked with her agent and her agent she's not my agent anymore, but she was very great, like getting in there and getting things done. And so I wrote a short proposal. Like I didn't write a full proposal, just kind of like, hey, let's get this done because I have meetings with so-and-so. And that was in April. And in June, I signed a contract, had a couple different offers from different publishing houses. Then that book came out in November of the following year of 16. So I remember having the conversation with my husband because 28 Days to Hope for Your Home was self-published and it was earning on Amazon. And I was like, I cannot write how to book and not include that 28-day guide in it because it is the step-by-step. I'm really big on not making things up, like not reinventing the wheel for the sake of new content. And so I said, I've got to include that in it, which means I have to take it off of Amazon. And it was like, that thing is earning me money. And what if I take it off? And we just looked at each other and we were like, this was the goal. Right? Like this was the goal, was to be a writer, and to have a traditionally published book is a huge step in that being my identity, right? Is being a writer. So we're just like, let's just do it. And I'm so incredibly thankful.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, because it's done really well.
That's what I was going to ask. So how well has that book done?
So that book has done very well. What's funny, haha, I don't know if it's funny, haha, but the second book, so when I got that book contract, I pitched one book and they came back with a 2-book offer. I know people have lots of different feelings about 2-book offers, right? So I don't recommend it. And yet I did it again. Like my last contract I did is a 4-book contract, but
oh wow, okay,
yeah, that I know. Anyway, so the first book, let's just be honest, thank you Marie Kondo, but because of her and how well her book had done, every publisher wanted a decluttering book, wanted a cleaning and organizing, right? And so I was my publisher's cleaning and organizing book. So that one came out, but it didn't do as well as Marie Kondo's book. And so it did fine, but it didn't do fantastic. Well, then the other reality of publishing is that you've got people in and out all the time. Right? Is my mic working okay?
Yep, it's doing great.
Okay. So you've got people in and out all the time. So the people who had brought me on, which that means they are the ones with skin in the game for my stuff, half of them had left. Okay. And so when so for my second book, there were new marketing people. Well, they had no actual skin in the game. And so my second book, kind of a long story, I don't know how much you want to hear, but I basically had 9 weeks to write my second book because
oh my gosh,
it was horrible. Yes. Almost killed me. No, because what happened was the marketing, like they did 3 phases of marketing for my first book that came out in November. It's called How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. So they're like, let's do a get ready for the holidays marketing campaign. And then let's do a New Year, New You campaign. And then we'll do a spring cleaning campaign. Well, once the New Year, New You campaign came along, I was like, okay, well, I have to work on this second book now. Like it's, according to my contract, it is due, I think it was June 2nd of 2017. I'm like, I have to get this done. And they started sending me all these, like, write an article for this place and this place and this place, which some of those do well. I'm now at a point where I can say, no, I don't want to do that. Like if you can see me, it's one that's going to move books, I'll do it. But at the time I was like, and I shouldn't have said this, but I said to the marketing people, I don't have time to do these articles because I've got to write the second book. Well, the next thing I knew, I got a message from somebody saying, oh, we're not sure that's the subject we want for the second book or not. So we'll put that on. And I was like, anyway, well, then as soon as all that was over, they're like, yeah, we do want that. And now it really is due on June 2nd. So
of course.
Yeah, of course. So I wrote it in 9 weeks. That book, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, they're always going to hear this. Let's just say that it was not one that the publisher put a lot of marketing effort into. Okay. So it was basically, I marketed it myself, but it is the core. Like it is, a decluttering process is unique. It's different from any other decluttering process. It works really well. And so I pushed it myself really hard. And that was the one that took on a life of its own. The other one has done well, like comparatively to most books, it has done well. Decluttering at the Speed of Life has done really well, right? Like, so that's the one paying for my kids' college, basically. So
very cool.
Yeah. So it keeps on doing well, right? Yeah. Like it keeps on selling. So it wasn't until I think Decluttering at the Speed of Life sold 100,000 copies in less than, I think, about 9 months or so.
Wow.
So that was a big moment, right? Like a big, oh, okay. And when it sold 100,000 copies, suddenly I started hearing from my publisher again, and they started doing promotions, and they started, because I don't think anybody was paying attention. Like nobody had noticed that it was doing well until it hit this milestone. And then they went, oh, wait, what? This book is doing so well. So at that point, then my publisher started doing a lot of promotions with Amazon, promotions on Audible. I had an Audible thing. Let's see, it was the day that, trying to think, it would have been in 2020. Oh, okay. No, 2021. It would have been in 20, because I remember it was inauguration day, right? So not this last inauguration day.
Yes, but the one before.
So they did a like $3.99 or something on Audible. And it got to the #1 spot in Audible for like 2-3 days. I mean, that's like a huge big deal. Right? So it built on itself. And that's the one that's my bread and butter that then also has allowed me to do other books. And then they asked me to do a gift book, which do you know what that is?
I don't.
A gift book has like pictures, and it's more, like tip format kind of a thing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
6,000 words. It's more like, little short version of things. So they asked me to do that, a version of the other one. So at that point, that's when I kind of worked with my publisher again and went, oh, this is like a whole different group of people. And I really enjoyed the experience working with them. So then my following books that I've had come out, I've stayed with that same publisher.
That is very cool to have that. Well, and while that's happening, right? And there's this, I would imagine, like the tension between working on the book and then the pressure of the book, and then also your business. What was kind of happening at the same time? Because when I talk to a lot of business owners, and I've even experienced it myself, it felt like a lot of businesses grew rapidly between 2015 and even 2020, like that 5-year span. There's things you can look back on where Google was going crazy, Facebook ads were like printing money, or people had figured out webinar formulas, all of these things. I would commonly hear about that being like this golden era. Was this happening for you too on the business side?
There was definitely good traffic, right, to my blog. But I wish I could remember what year it was that I finally went, you know what? I'm doing other things. I am not going to write blog posts anymore. So I don't write them anymore. I will publish reader stories that they send to me. But because my blog was a transformational diary, basically, of like me talking about what I was doing from beginning to end, it still gets a lot of views. A lot of people read from the beginning to the end. But I will say that I did start my podcast, I think in 2013 or 2014, and probably 2013. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was a great time to start.
That really was.
That was like, that to me is the thing that took off, that I had no idea how much that would transform my business. Because I feel like that's where I got just really dialed in super fans, was from the podcast itself. So that's been going for almost 12 years now. And
that connects the dots too between like the audiobook piece and your podcast, because you're right. When I have people that do the same thing where they listen to my podcast and they feel so connected. And I think it's because as we are podcast listeners, I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but I do. I'm listening to them when I'm getting ready, when I'm taking a shower, when I'm like driving my kids. There's these things where they do feel like I'm connected with them. Like they are a close, intimate part of me that I think video doesn't in the same way. I think it kind of is trending towards that, especially as we see podcasts more on YouTube and things like that. But I think there's something about that audio connection. So it makes sense to me why you would be asked to do that audio book portion.
Right. And it pairs so well with what I'm talking about, right? Because people are decluttering while they're listening. They're cleaning, listening. And so it just worked. And in a way where I didn't have any idea. I just thought it sounded fun to have a podcast, right? Like, I don't know, were you at the one when we met at the Savvy Blogging Summit, were you at the one in Colorado Springs?
No, just at the one in
Cincinnati. Okay. So I remember it going to a session and the lady who was speaking, I think it was Maria Bailey, maybe was her name, but it was supposed to be a session about YouTube and podcasts, right? And so I went because I was like, well, those things sound fun to me. And this was at the time where blog was the thing that we had. Our business, everybody there, that was what we did. We had a blog. And I was like, well, that sounds like something I might be interested in. So I went and she said the words, "You don't have a blog, you have a message." And I was like, what? And it made me go, what is my message? Right? Like, what is my message? I'm just thinking of myself as writing about what I'm doing in my house and getting it under control and all that kind of stuff. And I went, oh, my message is there's hope for your home, no matter how hopeless you are. Right. And so I transferred into thinking of it as a message. And her point was take that message and put it into different format. Right. Because like you were saying, like, I listen to podcasts. I get it. I had never listened to a podcast before I started my podcast. And that is not recommended. Right. Like,
no, don't do that. Listen to a few first.
At the same time, it was this realization that, okay, the same thing that I'm writing on the blog, I can be sharing on the podcast, because I had thought if I was going to start a podcast, it had to be about something else that was interesting enough to make blog readers listen. And her point was, no, there's just different kinds of people. There's people who read blogs. There's people who listen to podcasts. Sometimes they overlap, but for the most part, they don't overlap. And so you take your same message, which now is the same thing I do with YouTube. I am not coming up with all this new stuff to put on YouTube. I'm just taking the stuff that I've already been teaching it and now teaching it on YouTube as well. That's the way it's rounded everything out, which then gave me the freedom to say, you know what, I'm writing books and I'm putting out podcasts, and I don't think that that new blog posts are the thing that's moving my business forward. So I can let that go because I've got all these other areas that are bringing me more. The blog still has value for me, but it's not my focus anymore because, as you were saying, as you're growing and all that, like, I can't just add a whole new content stream to my day. That's like a whole job to add on doing this and this. Like when I started my podcast, I said, okay, I can do this, but I can only do it if I don't edit. So in the beginning, I didn't edit. It was years before I actually hired an editor and had them edit it for me because I was like, that's what I'm able to do.
Yes.
That's the time that I have. And because I had that attitude, I started in 2013, and starting in 2013 was a huge advantage over having waited until I could really do it well. I might not have done it until 2020. Well, that's when a lot of people started their podcasts, and it just was harder to get noticed or have people pay attention.
Well, and your podcast, because it had been started so long before, also came before the Marie Kondo, before all these other things, so that it was already there when people searched, and it had gained some kind of credibility there to where it could come alongside. And I think that's the thing that goes back to your experimentation, is you never know when you start an experiment how that will affect you in the future. And looking at 2009 to 2025, I mean, your business has endured lots of ups and downs, I'm sure. Lots of different elements coming into it between the blog and the podcast and video and books, a pandemic, a recession, however people talk about it. But I guess, how have you navigated those ups and downs? Not just the pressures of what's expected of you. I guess maybe an even more vulnerable question would be, have you had a point where you thought, I think I've done? Like, I think I can no longer do it anymore. Have you had that point? If you haven't, what do you think has prevented you from hitting that?
Well, I mean, like I said, I did come to a point where I said, I think I'm done with the writing on the blog.
Okay.
Right. And so it's the letting go. I have hired people along the way as contractors. I still don't have anybody who works full-time for me, but I have one who's close to full-time. And basically, anytime I take something new on, or something comes up that just is like, well, this is an added huge task, that you weren't expecting to have come into your life, I say, okay, either I give something up or I hire somebody to do this for me. Right. And that has been the thing that has allowed me to keep going. Right. So in the times where I write my books, I basically, everything else goes barely on hold. The podcast has to keep going, right? The YouTube keeps going because I put those out every week, except in the summer. And that's another thing too. I mean, like, how have I survived? I've taken summers off. Like
yes,
that. And I can't tell you how many people just like who are in this business just look at me and go, hit.
Yeah. It's a foreign concept that it's almost like this tightly held, I'll never take summers off.
Anytime. Like people just really don't think they can take any time off. And they're like, how have you done that without it hurting your business? I'm like, well, I'm sure it has hurt my business. Like, I'm sure that I could be in a different place if I had not taken summers off, but it was worth it to me, right? Because I think because I take summers off, that's the reason I'm able to keep going. Like by the time I get to the end of May, and we're recording in June, right? Like it's a little different now. My kids are in college, when I started this. But I am able to do this because I'm like, for June and July, I am not going to worry about it. Now, there's just things that go on and contracts and things like that and books and all that. But for the most part, I just give myself permission to say, I'm not on the grind for those 2 months. And then usually by August, I'm excited about getting going again. Right. And so does it hurt it? It used to take me until probably October to kind of gain my traffic and numbers on my podcast and all that back after I came back after summer. But now it basically comes immediately back. And I have had so many people tell me, people who aren't entrepreneurs, just say, thank you for modeling that. They say, I don't like it. I don't like that your podcast stops in the summer, but it makes me stop and think and realize, oh, there has to be boundaries upon this, because I'm like, it comes down to, is it my kids or is it my business? Because that's what it was. I was trying to keep on vlogging and my kids were home and I was like, I'm sucking at everything. Like I am cranky all the time. I can't do any of it. And so I just found out, you know what, I'm just going to let that go, because family, that's my number one thing. And that determines all of my decision making. How's that going to affect them? And I can remember when my kids were in high school, my son, who is my least sentimental of all of them, he was like, you're still going to take summers off, right? And I was like, yeah, I am. And he was, okay, good. Because he could just tell the huge difference when I did that. Did that answer the question at all?
No, it did. It was great. I think one of the things that has been so helpful for me as of late, and you have a business to consumer business and I have a business to business business. So, I mean, the two are impacted at different times, especially when we have like large scale world events, or even when we have kind of personal events. So I think one of the things I like to ask people is how they have wrestled with the entrepreneurial journey and found balance. And I think you answered it in that sense of creating boundaries around, I have this bandwidth and it's only as big as this. And if I go past it, it's like a balloon, it's going to burst. And there's going to be lots of things that are damaged in that wake. So if I keep this kind of at the boundary at which it can hold enough air, then I can keep going. And I think that's the biggest reason that people either burn out or they get so overwhelmed, or they come up to that question of, is this still for me? And I've had more conversations with people lately who have been saying, I don't know if I can stay in business much longer. It feels like buying is different. It feels like my customer is different. And a lot of that depends on niche, but a lot of that too depends on the foundation you've set up all along the way. Like, have you been white knuckling it this whole time? Have you been doing everything like Instagram, TikTok, blog, podcast, and you are just spread so thin? And I think your story is such a great example of saying, I'm going to do these things. And when I add in something into the mix, something else has to go out. Like it's kind of, this is not how you said it, but it's like, there's only room for three. And if there
is my container concept, like this is one of the main, is like space is finite. And if you try to keep more stuff in your space than will fit, there is no hope of it ever being under control. That is the thing, right? Like it's not possible. I think I was going to say, and this is something that I fully, completely understand and validate, that there are a lot of people potentially listening who are like, oh, I could never do that, right?
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say. I don't worry about snazziness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I get it. It looks like the way to succeed. And it is the way to succeed in many ways, right? is to have the flashy, amazing videos, right? The amazing, beautiful podcasts with like everything perfect and all this. And the reality is that I made the choice back when I decided to start my podcast and said, I either don't do a podcast or I do it without editing. And so I did it without editing. And I was very open and honest and said, I'm not editing. And here's the reason, because it's either don't edit or don't do it. And people said, please keep doing it. And so I just worried about actually providing real value as opposed to all the bells and whistles, right? And like with my YouTube channel, like I did YouTube years and years ago. And the reason I stopped was because it was taking focus away from my home. Like I didn't want to declutter because I didn't want to put a bra on, And so I was like, wait, this is backfiring. It's keeping me from working on my home. It's making me put it off. So I couldn't do that anymore. And that's why I decided not to edit with my podcast. But then when I started YouTube again in like 2021, I said, okay, because my YouTube channel just started blowing up because I was doing a course with some YouTubers. And I was like, okay, I need to have YouTube content out there because it's 10 years old and I've developed all my concepts since then. But I just said, okay, I'm going to do it, but I don't watch other YouTube videos, right? Because they're so much snazzier. They're so much prettier and more professional looking. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do what I can do and what actually works within my abilities and my level of time that I have to give to it. And it's been successful, right?
Because it's relatable. Like, because that you're even the one that I watched, it's like you're in your home, you're on the counter, midway, your dogs bark. And it was hilarious because you do that like jump scare warning coming, but you're actually doing what I would do. If I was, I think you had just remodeled your bathroom and it had 50,000 views. And it was this, you had a camera from the top down to you're like, okay, I'm going to try this. Like, let's see if this works.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah, please do.
So my son is my editor. I was like, you have to crop this because I'm not wearing any pants in the video.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a dork, but I was like,
love that. Yes, that is so great. Because you have this like really pretty pink top and it just, you like picture these really cute jeans. I mean, that's the best. But that is how you get content done. And I think that's not talked about that anymore. It's like we do wait for perfection or we do wait till we have our hair done and our makeup done and all these kinds of things. And we forget that takes this chunk of time before we actually do it. And then we're like in this mode that's not authentic almost. And I loved it.
And is it helpful? Because, how do I say this? One of the things that it is both something that I get as a criticism from people who are like, oh, you need to have whatever. But the people who are truly being helped by me and who desperately need my help tell me thank you for this all the time. And that is, I resist reinventing the wheel. Because I think when you're on this content creation business model, it feels like you have to come up with new stuff all the time. My target audience is the me of 2008, who was in tears over my home, who was like, I'm an intelligent person. Why does my home make it look like there's something make me feel like there's something legitimately wrong with me? Like, I didn't get it. And I did not need snazzy. I needed something to get down and dirty and teach me the truth, right? Like, what does it take to change your home? So even though I have things that I say over and over, I talk about the same thing and I come at it from all these different angles, millions of different angles, right, on the same subject. And I totally get why the people who don't need that are like, oh my word, you say the same thing. Like, well, there's lots of people saying lots of other things. But that's one of the things that I see that both exhausts the creator, but it also takes you into this element of getting away from being helpful when you're trying to make up new ways to do things, right?
Right.
It's what has been successful for me has been just drilling down and saying, what is it that people need? I actually train coaches now. I
saw that. Decluttering coaches, right?
Right. And that was the missing piece. Right? Like that was the thing that I couldn't offer people because if they want to learn it, there's every kind of content that you possibly consume of me teaching this. And yet some people needed their hand held. And I'm like, okay, well now I've done that. So that's how I built my business, is going like, what is it that people need? What is missing? What way for them to learn this is missing, and then just filling that in. And it just makes a very broad base, which I think has helped me weather all those storms. I mean, people right now it's really hard, right? And so if my business model was only on website ads, it would be really bad and I would want to give up, right? But that's just one piece of it. And so other things are growing while that thing is stagnating.
Yeah, that was such a smart move. When did you get the idea for creating coaches?
I had it a long time ago, but it was not in my bandwidth to do that.
Okay. So when did you implement it?
It was in 2020, I think the very end of 2022. Okay. So they have been, they've been certified coaches, have been actively, out there working with people for getting 2.5 years now.
And the amount of stories you get back now are probably greater than what you were getting by yourself. And sometimes we think of like impact, but I think too like, oh, I'm going to say like mini Danas are out there like meeting with people in their home and you get to hear back from them. And you're like, oh, I never would have heard that or I never would have impacted that person had they not had somebody in person doing this with them. Because they might have listened to something that you said and then they just stalled out. But they needed somebody down on their knees in the kitchen cabinet going, let's do this.
Yes, exactly.
So great. Okay, I have a couple last three kind of a little bit rapid fire for you. Okay. If you had to share or if you had to rant, about kind of a false message in your industry that you hope people don't fall for, what would it be?
The first step of decluttering is to pull everything out of the space. That is most people's assumption, because that's what most people will teach.
Yes. There was a TLC show, wasn't there, a long time ago about decluttering where they like took everything out of the house and put it like on the lawn? I can't remember what it was called.
I think it was Clean Sweep. Yeah. But even of a drawer, like the idea is that you have to pull it all out first. And I'm like, nope, that is the number one thing that I teach against, right? Like not that I'm teaching against it, I'm just teaching a better way, the no mess declutter.
Yes. Okay. So what is one thing that you would gush about? You're like, I love this about those who teach decluttering and how to equip people to organize their life.
Yeah. I think that the thing that I've realized, because, I've always kind of been with my little blinders on, but over the last 4 or 5 years, I've done a lot more collaborating with other people. And it's the true passion that people have to help other people, because they see, sometimes we can see, even when people can't always see themselves, what it is that's so frustrating about their space, but wanting to give people that freedom, wanting to give people that hope. I have loved getting to work with other people who are passionate about that as well.
Yeah, giving them freedom. Okay, here's another one. If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, author, business owner, who would it be and why?
We can miss. I will think of something great to say later.
While you're falling asleep, totally. This one's always on the spot. Or you could say, like, I guess what has impacted you as a business owner, if there's like a book or an author or somebody that has helped support you while you grow your business?
Yeah. I mean, I don't listen to as many business things as I used to, just because I did get so overwhelmed that I had to finally go, I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing. Right. But then I'll go back every once in a while. And I would say I got so much from Pat Flynn in the beginning. Like I really, there was so much that he would share that was implementable. You know what I mean? Like so many things he would share that he would, I don't know if he still does the thing where he answers people's questions in 5 minutes or whatever, but he would do podcasts and there would just be such relatable things. And you would have people come on and share their stories, and that's other people's stories of what they've done and what has worked for them has always been the most, impactful to me.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, so where do you see A Slob Comes Clean, Dana White, in 3 to 5 years?
My goal at this point, so I'm in the middle of a 4-book contract.
Yes. What book are you on? Are you on book 2?
I'm technically on book 3, but 2 is a children's book, and it will come out it's done, but it will come out in February or March, maybe, of next year. And so I'm currently writing my second trade book, which is like 60,000 word book that is due mid-September. And then I'll have another gift book, and I'm not actually sure what that one's about at this point. But when those books are written, my goal is to move primarily into speaking. So that is, we're doing a lot of setting up for that being the thing, partly because my kids are out of the house now. And so I didn't ever want to speak regularly because
takes a lot of time.
Especially when they're teenagers, there's so many things going on that you don't want to miss. But at this point, well, that is where we're headed, being the primary thing. And I always say at the end of writing a book, I'm like, I I don't think I have any more books in me. And then I usually do. So we'll see about writing more books. But cool.
Well, Dana,
Thank
you for sharing your story here on the Simple Pin podcast. And I hope it sparks some ideas for the people listening, gives them hope wherever they are at. And where can they go to connect with you?
If you just Google Dana K. White, you have to put the K in there because Dana White is a man who's bald and owes the ultimate writing championship. So
okay.
You just Google Dana White, you'll get him. But if you put Dana K. White, you'll find me. So I'm on YouTube and at aslobcomesclean.com. Still no blogspot anymore, but it's still that same website, and or DanaKWhite.com, either one.
I love it. Thanks again, Dana. I really appreciate it.
That's fun.